Hey guys, it's Brian.
Hey, I'm Nate.
It's Barry.
And welcome to the Collecti-Bros podcast. Thanks for joining us for episode 7, part of our Is It Worth It series on Godzilla on PS4. So this game was originally released on the PS3, originally only in Japan, in December of 2014, just in time for the 60th anniversary of Godzilla. The PS3 and the PS4 version worldwide shipped in July of 2015. This game was developed by Atari/Natsume after the merger.
It's Natsume.
Natsume. Yeah, my Japanese is great, by the way, so this is going to be a fun one. But, yeah, Atari ended up purchasing Natsume. So...
You're good.
Yeah. And then published by Bandai Namco Games, of course, the license holder for Godzilla. This is the first and only Godzilla game released for the 8th generation of consoles. That's why I think it's got some pedigree and prestige behind it.
What specifically is 8th generation?
PS4, Xbox One. You might throw the
Switch,
Wii U in there.
Switch count in that?
The Wii U, I
think. Is Wii U the next gen?
More Wii U, yeah.
This is kind of in the middle there.
Right. It's kind of weird to say that like Switch is on par with. It's not with Series X and PS5, but yes, Switch. I
consider 8th gen.
Oh,
been out for 5 years.
It's true.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess Wii U's behind it. So like Wii U was with
PS3.
That seems, I don't know. We're old. This is all starting to blur.
Nintendo's in its league of its own.
Nintendo does their own thing.
Yeah.
Nintendo's on Nintendo time. But yeah, this is the only Godzilla game for the 8th generation of consoles. The exception would be there's a couple Japanese games where Godzilla makes an appearance. Again, I'm not going to butcher these titles. There's a Japanese, basically a giant kaiju simulator where you play as a human, and like Ultraman, Godzilla make an appearance in that. There was a VR game for Shin Godzilla as an experience. I guess it's not really a game. The only other instance of Godzilla showing up in video games in this time period was very recently in Warzone, which was awesome for Project Monarch.
Fall Guys had a Godzilla DLC too.
They had skins and stuff, yeah. Well, it's a Fall Guy dressed up as Godzilla, right?
It's licensed.
I guess it can count. But yeah, the whole thing is few and far between were there Godzilla games. And really, especially in North America, hardly any. I mean, the last one was the PS2 Wii one, Unleashed.
Yeah, it's been a lack for sure.
Right, and it's actually, I think, what kind of drew people to this game, well, the few that bought it when it came out. Because, I mean, we'll get into that a little later, but this game's very geared toward a very specific audience, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So this game had some developmental issues during development for the PS3 version. Like I mentioned previously, it was released during the 60th anniversary, so they had a window to meet where it's like, hey, we have to get this game out before the anniversary is up. And it ended up releasing at crunch hour, December 2014 for the 60th anniversary. The developers read an interview with the director, which, oh god, here we go, Japanese again. Ready? Yakuo Mazukui.
God,
I'm
that was
sure
so
that's
off.
so right.
Actually, it's probably like Yuki Kiko.
Time to Google Translate and make it speak in
Mizuochi.
Community college
Yuki
dropout
Kiko
over here,
Mizuochi. I don't know. Try something like that.
Community college dropout over here.
It just drops in the Windows narrator.
But yeah, he was the director from this game, so a lot of this information comes from translated interviews with him. Said the biggest issue was the crunch, right? Like they had tons of stuff they wanted to put in this game because hearing him speak and the team speak about this game, labor of love, man. Like for people that don't know, Godzilla in Japan, it'd be the equivalent of like, you know, Marvel trusting somebody with the Spider-Man license or DC trusting somebody with the Batman license. Like Godzilla is an iconic figure worldwide, but like specifically in his home country, Japan. So it was a big deal for these guys to get the actual license for it because Toho's very, very, very protective of that license. I mean, to the point where even when they were making character models, Toho had to prove everything. The way the game plays, the way the game looks, and even developing the game, Toho was like, we have a very specific vision for what this game to be, and it needs to match this to a T. Which we'll also cover that a little bit later because I think there's a lot of misleading information and maybe poor advertising for what this game is exactly, but we'll get there.
Yeah, it's like it's fascinating to watch American-made Godzilla stuff, and if you know anything about development history of like the 98 film or anything like that, Toho's notorious for being difficult, I guess it's been quoted as, but it's because they care about their property. Godzilla's a labor of love. If you know anything, like the fan base is rabid. They love their Godzilla, so it's just be protective of it. But it is interesting. They almost were faced with having a licensed movie title style crunch, but this one wasn't based on a specific movie. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, it's funny too. We touched on a little bit like how big of a deal the Godzilla license is. Godzilla films, there's more Godzilla films than any other franchise. We're talking more than James Bond, more than Marvel movies. Like, Godzilla is the longest running movie franchise ever. People, I think, yeah, everyone knows, Godzilla, big lizard, destroys stuff, but it's much more than that. And especially to, like you were saying, the rabid fan base, it's beyond beloved. And Toho really, really takes care of that, especially after the 98 American Godzilla movie.
Which is my favorite.
There's things about it. So while developing this game, funny stories would come up. Like, they were talking about how protective Toho was with it. They wanted to add certain characters. Like, for example, they wanted to add Toho King Kong, which we'll get in this whole conversation. We'll try to gloss over it as fast as possible. But basically, there is King Kong in the Toho universe. It's not like your classic Universal King Kong or Peter Jackson's King Kong. Yeah, it's a giant ape and his name's King Kong, but he's a different kaiju, okay? They wanted to put him in the game, but obviously Universal was developing Kong Skull Island and teasing later the Kong vs. Godzilla movie. So they didn't want to impede on Universal's rights to kind of still figure that out. Again, Toho's extremely protective of these things. Universal's extremely protective of King Kong. So the development team was like, oh, if this is going to be a Godzilla history project game, like, we need to have King Kong. He was the first colored Godzilla movie. Like, he's a huge deal to Godzilla lore. He's the first one to give him like a big run for his money in battle. And Toho was like, no, we can't risk it. And every time they tried to add a character, Toho would be like, no, don't do it. So it got to the point where the director, I'm not going to butcher your name again, sir, was saying that they would add characters to the game and ask for, quote, ask for forgiveness and not permission. That's actually how we got Jet Jaguar, because one of the animators was like, I love Jet Jaguar. Like, I'm putting him in this game. And he animated him, made all the sounds and everything, and then showed it to Toho, and they're like, yeah, we can do Jet Jaguar. So somebody got something right, because the more Jet Jaguar, the merrier. But that was doing with the PS3 launch. They basically said that they knew they were going to do a PS4 version, but they had to meet the contract with Toho to get it released in time, so it barely made it into December. The PS4 version is more of a director's cut, if you will. It actually has a completely different title in Japan. It's called Godzilla Versus because of the added multiplayer mode. There's also extra monsters, extra levels, and a different, I don't want to say gameplay mode, but a different mode of the diorama mode. As far as sales figures are concerned for this game, there is a PS3 and a PS4 SKU, but I think, Barry, you have the chart pulled up right. It's, spoiler alert, it's pretty low.
Yeah, when the PS3 one came out in Japan, it looks like it did about $60,000 total. And then when the PS4 one came out in Japan, it did half of that number. So by that time, either people didn't want to buy it again or already owned it. PS4 version for North America was about 110,000.
Oof.
Which is not a lot. I mean, we're talking week one numbers is 25,000. So total, it looks like about 200,000 for PS4 Godzilla worldwide.
It's a tough sell when you know a PS4 version's coming, and then we didn't even get the PS3 one, and the game definitely got lost in the shuffle, I feel like.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think as far as North American release, I think marketing has a huge deal with sales, but I think we'll cover that a little bit later in the price and collectability aspect. Alright, so to cover the story mode, well, again, I guess I'm good at picking games without a real big story, right? The main mode of this game is called God of Destruction, and I guess that's your, quote, story mode. There's different branching paths, there are different difficulties based on this branching path. It's basically like a giant NCAA bracket, right? You start from the left, and you can basically pick easy, medium, or hard levels, and honestly, the game's horribly imbalanced, so it's like some of the easy levels are really hard, and some of the hard levels are really easy. But the overall objective / story of this game is to make your monsters grow, to throw in the sweet Power Rangers meme. But you pick a character, you can pick Godzilla, or if you have any of them unlocked, or you grinded for hours to get the other characters. It does play a little different based on what character you pick. So for example, when you're playing as Godzilla, your goal is to destroy as much of the city as possible to keep growing. So every time you destroy certain objects or buildings, there's many objectives like destroy 10 planes or something like that. They'll make your overall monster grow. There's generators you need to destroy on every level, which the generators are a whole big talking point of this game. We'll get into that in a minute. the overall goal is to reach 100 meters tall. And if you do reach 100 meters, you end up fighting the 2014 legendary Godzilla. So that's kind of a cool little addition they put in there for the PS4 version. The final level is the same every time. You play as Burning Godzilla. You battle Super Destroyer 3. So there is kind of like a ending to the story, but there's not like story in depth here. Let's just be honest.
It's almost like a Mario Party board, and it's kind of scenario based on which path you take. And generally, you're going to have many objectives and a main objective in every map. And no matter what monster you're playing off, it's kind of the same concept going through.
Yeah, really, the only deviating branch, interesting parts of the story here is like the higher destruction level is, you have different leaders attacking you and dealing with the strategy of dealing with Godzilla. And hands down, my favorite one's the first leader you get. He's like, oh, Godzilla is just this defenseless creature. He doesn't mean us any harm. And then you just flatline the whole first level and destroy everything. And he's like, well, hey, we could have handled that better. And he gets the boot like instantly. And it's really funny. And the dubbing's horrible and everything. So all these characters have a decent amount of personality for how horrible the dubbing is. I guess it's not intentional, but it kind of adds the charm if you're a Godzilla fan, where if you've watched these dubbed American movies, like the dubbing was horrible and it fits so appropriate with this game. But that's about the only story meat you're getting here. Every once in a while, a monster's going to pop up, and that might change the dynamic a little bit. There's not a real story per se.
Yeah, it's a Godzilla game covering 60 years of film with 60 different potential stories you could have at least attempted to dabble in, and you just chose to go a route where you don't really play any movie like story going through. It's very much very loose.
Barry's a huge fan of stories in video games, and this is my second game now where I've picked a riveting story where I need to hear your input, Barry.
There was none.
Transition. Another hurdle for this game was dealing with the sensitive issue of Godzilla's origin, which, if you know, he's basically created with nuclear radiation, which rightfully so can be a sore subject in Japan. The newer movies have kind of downplayed his nuclear origins, right? Like, it's still a side effect of Godzilla. So the original 54 Godzilla movie was an analogy for the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. And recently, the newer Godzilla movies, you have the issue of the earthquakes in 2011 and the nuclear reactors that had issues with that. So Toho's been mindful and respectful of that. And actually, Shin Godzilla, the whole movie is literally a reference of how long it took for Japan to deal with that whole disaster. If you watch that movie, it's almost like, come on, deal with the lizard. Like, come on, we have to get something moving. The way that they got around the nuclear energy in this game is with the primary objective being destroying these generators, right? An interview with the director, he said that, nuclear energy is never going to be something that's totally out of Godzilla. It's part of them. They know that. But Toho and Natsume came up with the idea of destroying these generators that contain G energy. So it's kind of an interesting story / way to get around a sensitive subject where...
So what do y'all think the G stands for?
Probably Godzilla.
Gourmet.
Maybe
Godzilla slammed it. He's like, this is just far. And he slammed it. Gourmet energy.
Did they even ever say what the G stands for?
No.
All right.
It's like G-Force,
Maybe Gamera.
Not the G4 stand for gerbils.
Yes.
G Fuel. He's just drinking G Fuel.
I can't. Anyways, continue on. I'm sorry.
I think it's really interesting. Like you said, 54 was clearly designed in mind to be political, and even if you go through the movies, even in the 70s when it was extremely goofy era for Godzilla, the one with Ibara was super political. It was about climate and pollution. And then with
time,
you touched on Shin Godzilla, it's basically a political comedy disguised as a Godzilla movie. So it's something that's always been a part of Godzilla's DNA, is political controversy, poking the bear, if you will. So it's interesting that they've kind of shied away from it. I understand why, but I think from an outside perspective, I'm not part of Japan, so it's different for me, I'm sure. But it's something that you have to toe the line on embracing and kind of being sensitive, because it's a very obviously sensitive subject. So it's something difficult to make with any Godzilla medium.
So it's funny with these generators, if you read a lot of the reviews and everything, people just slam and slam and slam these generators. But knowing what I know now and seeing this interview, it was like eye-opening, man. I wish everybody could see this. Like, not to get too far ahead, but I have a very different view on this game from when I first played it after seeing this interview with this director. But the funny thing is, like, even the submarine level, right? You're basically in this giant open ocean, and it's like destroy the generators, destroy the generators, destroy the generators, every level. And there's no generators in the submarine level, but there's a submarine, and they still call it a generator. So
I thought the submarine had a generator on it. It was like a
big
nuclear sub,
yeah,
but it's a G
but they call
sub.
it a generator. So yeah, get used to destroying generators. If you like destroying generators, man, this is your game.
So, like, it's weird to me going over the different game modes. They're all pretty similar. Like, one of them is just like a boss battle thing. It's weird to make a game without any kind of constructive story. You could have easily made this game like a stage-based thing where you're doing different objective stages, and it still feels like an arcade game type of story. Like, there's not stories for most arcade games, but it still feels fluid, feels cohesive. This is kind of, even for having branching points, it doesn't feel constructed like a story. So it's interesting, I'll say, that they chose to go that route.
The branching points had nothing to do with the story. It was just what monster you were going to fight versus what monster you're going to fight in the other one. And some of the branches got you to the final boss. And that was it. That was all the branches did. Yep. You want to fight this monster, or you want to go the other route and see what the harder monster is supposed to be.
I wonder if that was a choice, or it's just like, hey, we're running out of time, let's just do it this way. It's the most to get the most levels and stuff on this map while we're fighting a crunch battle. I don't know.
It's weird for me to make an anniversary Godzilla game. It almost seems like the perfect time to make like an original story, but again, just hearing them talk about, yeah, we were on time crunch, like there's so many things they said they cut out, characters, modes, what have you. The best way I can summarize this whole game is almost as like, what a missed opportunity, especially for the anniversary of Godzilla. But
do you know when they started development of this game?
I don't know, but
because I'm sorry, if you know that the 60th anniversary is coming up, you can look at a calendar and count.
Right.
So you could have started earlier. I don't know. It seems super, super rushed for what we got.
Oh yeah.
So
it almost was like, hey, you guys have 6 months to make a 60th anniversary game. Do it. I'd be curious on how long this was in for development.
The only thing I know in that interview I read, and again, it's translated, so there might be a little loss in translation, but he was saying the merger between Natsume and Atari kind of put a hinder on things for a little bit, so I'm curious to see how much time they lost with that. But still, I get what you're saying. Like, you know how much time you have, so it is an interesting thing. Like, there's studios all the time that develop without the backing. Like, if you make a Godzilla game and you know they want it for the anniversary, like, they're going to pick it up. It's not like Atari doesn't have money.
I don't know. They could have skipped it and picked on 65th. Had 5 years to work on this game.
Shit. Would have been perfect.
Y'all never going to get a good Godzilla game after this flop.
No.
It sure doesn't seem like it.
It'll break my heart. I'll be sad the rest of the time.
Sorry.
You're right, though. So let's dive into the gameplay, guys. So I guess the best way to describe this game is an action game. Adventure seems a little rough. It's not much of an adventure. But
not much action either.
Right. My favorite way to categorize it is a Godzilla sim. And it's interesting, in this interview, the director was basically saying, under Toho's directions, like, make it a celebration of the movies. We want it to play, we want it to feel, we want it to look like the classic Godzilla movies. And I think if you know that, they hit the nail around the head. Like, the filters you can put on to make it black and white, you can change the model for Godzilla and make him look like the classic Godzilla from the 50s, 60s era. There's so much you can do to make this feel like your Godzilla Cream Dream movie. Even down to the controls. It feels like Godzilla. It feels like you're controlling this giant lumbering creature. It's not a fighting game. There's fighting elements, sure. But sitting there and categorizing as a fighting game, I think, does an injustice to it. And that's why I think it's interesting for the PS4 version. They're like, people want multiplayer. Let's add multiplayer. But this isn't a fighting game. Like, the fighting mechanics aren't good at all. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's hard to categorize like what type of game this is. It's definitely not. It's furthest thing from a fighting game, because there's previous Godzilla fighting games, whether it be side-scrolling like 16-bit era or the good Godzilla games at the PS2, Xbox, GameCube era. Those are like brawler fighting games. This is not that. It's not an action game because there's not a lot going on other than you button mashing, blowing up buildings, or walking over them. It's kind of its own breed, man. I think a Godzilla simulator is probably the closest thing you're going to get. But even then, that's kind of a lacking title, because if I say, hey, you want to play a game where you simulate being Godzilla, you're going to feel powerful. This just feels clunky, I guess is the word I'd look for. But I think we keep tapping on this. It's a lot of, I don't know if this was a creative decision or if this was more of a, we're running out of time here to get something playable out decision. But I think I will give it a mark for at least trying to be something unique, because it does feel very much like as a Godzilla fan, this feels like a huge celebration in Godzilla. And I could see what they were going for with the diorama mode, with even the main structure, picking a monster, go, be him, destroy the city. Just doesn't feel cohesive, which I said earlier, but it's a common theme with this game, unfortunately.
This game is so boring. This game is a Godzilla arcade game that should have never came to a console whatsoever. It was, here's a quarter, put your quarter into this arcade cabinet, play as your Godzilla, smash your town, congratulations. You did it. Put another quarter in if you want to play again. That's what this game was, and that's all it came down to.
Yeah, if it would have had like a score attack mechanic, like, hey, here's your, 2 minutes, 30 seconds to blow this city up, try to get a high score.
Well, and then even that, like, the most boring thing about this is not only, like, exceptionally slow controls. Extremely slow. The entire map is a square, and you can kind of see where the boundary line is, but then to 100% the map, you have to wreck everything in that square. And we're talking, like, light posts. So y'all are sitting around, slowly lumbering around as Godzilla, while helicopters are shooting you, and there's, like, 99%, and you're just, like, walking around trying to find a single light post that you forgot to get, just so you could get 100% completion on the map, just so you could get, I don't know, whatever the stupid token things were to, like, bring back the other monsters. Or they, like, tried to make it a weird RPG element where, like, the more tokens... What were they? They're, like, the seeds?
Yeah, they were like the pieces, basically. They all had different names, but to unlock different monsters and unlock moves and everything for your character, everything's behind a grind, right? So, for example, like, if you encounter, let's just say, Rodan in Mission 2, if you fight Rodan, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting pieces for Rodan. That's the funny part. So, like, you beat Rodan, you're supposed to get, like, Rodan pieces, one would imagine, right? But you might get Mechagodzilla pieces. The game's a giant effing grind.
It was in like, on that, I think the first time we fought Mothra, I want to say, and we got, like, one little Mothra token or something. But then you go back to, all right, let me unlock the character, and you needed, like, 2 Mothra tokens. Right. And I'm like, seriously? Like, I can't just fight him and unlock him, and then after that, it's really stupid to have a randomly generated numbered system of what, and I'm going to call them tokens because that just makes the most sense to me, but, like, whatever monster tokens dropped after the end of a fight. So you'd grind, and it would take, like, what? It wasn't that long per map. Couple minutes, but the couple minutes felt forever because you're just walking around trying to find a light post.
Yeah, when you're slugging around looking for a bridge, and I think the bridge was like 3 or 4 times when we were all playing together. It was like, where's it at? And we're all sitting there, like, scouting for it, going... It feels like we're going 2 miles an hour. Well,
and then the bridges that went outside of the boundary, like, those still counted because It looked like it was outside the boundary line, but you had to go and hit it, and it was stupid. So, like, you wasted all that time to clear the map to get 100%, to get maybe, I think it gave you the option of getting an extra little token, but you didn't know which one it was. So you spent all that time getting a stupid tiny little token, and then you have to go back into the monster and spend your tokens to unlock special moves and upgrades for whatever, but they cost so much that you just have to sit there and do it over and over and over and over and over. And it's just like, if I'm in an arcade, I'm gonna give you my quarter and then walk away. Like, you can't sit there for hours and do this game.
I think it goes back to, like, it's so frustrating. It's like, obviously, being a huge Godzilla fan, I want to do Mothra. First thing I want to do. Okay, so like Barry said, the first person we fought was Mothra larva, and I was like, awesome. I can't be Mothra. We just beat him. It's like, if you're going for something, it's so hard to even tell what you're going for, which is very frustrating, because I just want to play as Mothra and wreck some stuff as Mothra. If I got to sit here and slug around, it might as well be a giant larva.
This game was like the cream dream of studios that want you to pay money to buy the monsters, but there's no monsters to buy. Right. Like, it is so slow and so grindy that I wish I could be like, just buy it. Yeah. I was just like, oh my god, guys, can we please stop playing this? Can we just buy them so we can play the characters? You couldn't buy them. They had no option for that. It was like, sorry, you better grind it.
Yep. I hope you like destroying generators, and I hope you like grinding the same monsters in the boss battle mode over and over, because if you want everything, that's what you're going to do.
It's insane to me to think about. I don't know if that's just what their company motto or kind of direction goes for, but like y'all could have gave us Godzilla and then be like, here, pay like $2 and you can have Shin Godzilla. Instead of making me unlock him for this stupid grindy system, I would have rather paid $2 to get a Shin Godzilla than a Godzilla 2014. I don't know. Like, it was just... It was rough.
It was a slog. I guess to me, like, as far as your gameplay, if the gameplay was already simple and the controls weren't so simple piggybacking off that, maybe we'd have more rich of an experience. But you mash your square button to attack. You have either the trigger or the clicking of the stick to shoot like a charged energy thing, and you move. And the right stick turns your camera. That's about it.
Not true. You turn the camera with the bumpers. It's Japanese AF controls, baby.
That's right.
I thought, what does the other stick do?
The right sticks, when you have the interest points to get your data collection, which I never explained for the story, you just basically certain points on the map where it was like, hey, this is a point of interest where you can collect data on Godzilla. You click the right stick and the camera angle will change to a more
cinematic,
classic cinematic Godzilla style camera for about 5-6 seconds. And it will take a screenshot like you were saying, Barry, but however, there's not a lot of control there.
The only fun thing about that was you'd have to time it. I think I saw Nate doing it a lot, where you'd have to time it to when you, because you didn't take the picture, the system did it for you. So you had to sit there and guess when it was going to take the picture and then charge it like a super attack to get a cool picture. But like, that was it. You only got 2 options.
There was no reward for that. That was me just trying to have some fun.
Yeah.
Right. The only reward is on my, I think it was on my PS4 Pro. My background's actually one of the screenshots because like I timed it up perfectly and I was like, oh, this is awesome. But yeah, doesn't matter now.
Which we could have done with a photo mode, but that's beside the point.
Word.
Yeah, it was the bumpers that turned your character. You didn't really turn the camera. It was a weird hybrid of like Resident Evil tank controls with a better camera than Resident Evil, but added to the clunky for sure.
It's interesting though, because for what they're going for, how slow it is. Like there's sometimes you're walking, you hold up on the stick and it takes a good second before your foot connects to the ground. And when you're holding down the bumper to spin, you're going to move super slow. It adds to that Godzilla simulator aspect where you do feel like you're huge as shit and you can't move and you're giant and you're weighted. So it's interesting to say that. I'm not going to sit here and defend this game to the max, but I'm going to defend it a little bit. Knowing that it was supposed to be a Godzilla simulator, I think they nailed the controls, but as far as the execution of attacks and inputs, it's all slow. So like, let's say you sit there and grind it for 5 hours and you unlock the move, input that move. It's kind of, your typical square, triangle, square, circle, whatever to initiate that move. But it takes, you're a giant monster. It takes a couple seconds to get that move going. There's not like an input delay or as much as like the animation's got to catch up to it. But interesting note, it does feel like a tank because you do feel like a giant monster when you're controlling it. Reading this interview, the director was basically saying Toho wanted a very specific game, and that specific game was, this is a Godzilla sim. So in Japan, it was marketed as such, and I think that's why it's got, if you look at like the Kotaku reviews, they're all pretty solid, 7/8. I think there's like an 8.5 in there. It's you gotta think, I think it's appropriate because for this market, like Godzilla is a huge deal over there. I think they hit the nail on the head as far as that goes, but like the US version, that's not what we were promised at all. This game got unveiled during the Game Awards, and I remember seeing magazine ads for it where they're basically promising it's a fighter. Like, this is not a fighting game. Yeah, there's fighting in it, and I think it becomes a more competent, quote, fighter once you grind and unlock extra moves. But, man, the fighting's not going to hook you.
Yeah, when I saw this game being unveiled, I thought this was like the spiritual sequel to Destroy All Monsters Melee, and I was so excited because those games were beloved, and it's not what we got at all.
So there are different modes. There's the God of Destruction mode, which you covered, which is basically your story. You can beat it in about an hour and a half. It's quick, and it is made to have multiple runs, like we talked about, just grinding and grinding. There's also a King of the Monsters mode, and this is basically like Boss Rush, arcade, what have you. You fight one monster after the other, which you think would be the best way to grind for your tokens or your parts. But like I said, it's random. So let's say you fight, Mechagodzilla 2, Mechagodzilla 3, which, by the way, the Mechagodzillas have their own parts. It's just a giant grind. It's a chore, but that is honestly the best way to unlock pieces.
No, I remember it differently. I remember us going through the battle boss mode and still doing the whole thing, getting 1 token at the end.
Yeah.
So we switched back to the God of Destruction mode because every single match you would get 1 instead of...
I might have worded that wrong. You can beat that mode if you get cheesy spams and stuff quickly is what I was trying to say. So yeah, apologies for the confusion. But yeah, in a way it is more beneficial to keep going through God of Destruction because you get more pieces while you're doing your thing. And it is interesting. I forgot to cover this too in God of Destruction. So if you pick a different character, like let's say you pick a Guardian of Earth character, let's say you pick Mothra, you actually have to defend the generators from a monster coming ashore instead of attacking them. Thought that was kind of interesting. Now, how fun that is after 4 or 5 hours is up for debate, but they at least attempted something different with that. There's also the multiplayer mode. That's your online versus. The matchmaking is horrible. So, like, if you go in with a fresh baby boy Godzilla and you have no moves, you have your square, 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 and that's it, like, you're going to get wrecked because you're going to get matched up with, like, a 48 or a 50, and they've got all the moves grinded out, and they're going to wax you. And also, it is 1v1v1. So there's no local multiplayer either. It is literally online only. So if you want to play this with your buddy, like, they got to have a PS4 also, and they got to have a PSN account, and they got to be at home or wherever with you.
So it's 1v1v1.
Yep.
Is there no 1v1v?
Negative.
So even if me and Brian wanted to play it, we would have to sit in a lobby and wait for a third.
I think it will let you connect with 1 versus 1, but it's not designed that way, if that makes sense.
That's rough.
It's pretty wild.
Oh.
There is also the diorama mode, which, again, I think this could have been something awesome. I think it's a great idea. I just don't think it was executed very well. To describe it, basically, again, you have to grind for them. Surprise. There's basically figures or models you can buy with a set backdrop of your choosing where you can basically make a scene that doesn't move, which, God, what a missed opportunity. You just drop them in place. You can raise and lower them. You can spin them. And then you can take a picture with the PlayStation 4's picture capabilities. Like, oh, it's frustrating, man. I think this could have been awesome. Like, as a huge action figure guy, and specifically Godzilla figures was literally one of the first things I started collecting in my life. This could have been like my dream Godzilla game, man. Another interesting side note's that these character models for this mode were actually scanned of SH Monster Arts figures, which Bandai owns, so it makes sense for them to do that. But, like, even more reason, those figures are known for their articulation. Like, why didn't you have these pieces be articulated, or you can, like, basically
Some of them
make
were
a
animated.
clip? Oh, really?
Yeah. We didn't unlock very many, but there was
Hell no.
there was one Godzilla where he was animated. He
Nice.
just didn't move across the diorama.
Right.
He just stood there and did an animation.
Like wiggled.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, now that you mentioned it, I know there's a couple of them I saw online. Like, I know they have the Jet Jaguar Godzilla handshake's one of them, which there's a lot of fan service like that in this, but, like, you can't do anything with it. Like, you're playing a game, like you're saying, Barry. This is like an arcade experience to the 10th degree. I don't know about this diorama, but it's just the game in general. Like, this mode that you added to the PS4 version could have been like a Godzilla collector or an action figure guy. Like, one of my dream, check it off the boxes, catchphrase for a Godzilla game. Like, how cool would it have been if it's like, hey, you have this figure, you can animate, you can make a little clip, let them fight. Would have been awesome.
I think if the game overall was more polished and thought out, and then they were like, hey, we have extra time, let's put this diorama mode in, maybe. But when the rest of the game feels so scattered and rushed, it's hard to justify the diorama mode for existing. I thought it was really cool because I'm into Godzilla figures and Godzilla in general. So I thought it was a unique mode, but I feel like they could have used that time to clean up a lot more things. So it's hard for me to praise this mode being included.
The diorama mode tried to do 2 different things and they didn't do them well.
Yep.
So the whole thing was bad. I mean, you took it tried to do a photo mode, which why not give me just a photo mode option while I'm in combat, where if I'm shooting a Godzilla laser beam out of my back, I can pause it and then do the thing where every single other game on the PS4 does, is I can swivel around the environment and take pictures wherever I want to.
Oh, it's because you didn't grind for it.
And then, or if you want the grinding element and to cater to the group of people who grew up with the models and the figures and like having the whole set piece with the backdrop, unlock the models and then have an articulation system where you have you get it and you move the analog stick to click his jaw, and you can open and close his jaw as much as you wanted to, and then click his shoulder articulation point and move it in a certain position, and then like move the figure articulations where you wanted them and place that model in your diorama for the people who wanted to do that.
Right.
Like, it doesn't, I don't know. They tried to do two different things and neither of them were done well. And then that's what you got was a subpar diorama with like, I don't know, Godzilla emoji slapped on in an ocean that kind of moves. That was really it.
Yeah, and that's a mode they added exclusively for the PS4 version, so there's not really an excuse for, like, a crunch. It's a damn shame. You got anything else for gameplay, or move on?
It was bad.
So let's get into the graphics. First and foremost, we mentioned it previously that the monster scans were from the SH Monster Arts figures. I think they look great. They're hands down graphically the best thing about this game is your character models, as far as your kaiju and your mecha kaiju. They're super faithful. I would even say that the animations themselves you can tell this was a labor of love, down to a T. The animations are so faithful. And as a Godzilla fan, there's moments where you're like, man, that's awesome. Like, you're walking as Godzilla, you feel like you're walking as Godzilla. You play as Rodan, you're walking, you feel like you're walking as Rodan. You're crawling as Mothra, it feels like a snail's crawl with Mothra. It's very cool. They did a great job animating it. It's so perfect and cool to see as a Godzilla fan. As far as the rest of the environments, the cities don't look great. They're pretty ugly.
They're like PS2 graphics.
That's
They're pretty bad.
Yeah.
Even keeping in mind that this is technically like a PS3 game, even then it's like, oh boy.
Well, I was going to ask, do you know if they did a texture upgrade for the PS4 version, or did they even have time for it?
I don't know, but my eyeball tells me no.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
Yeah. But it's interesting, though, because as far as graphic fidelity, the cities don't look great, but there's small little hidden details. Like, a good example I noticed, so like when you're destroying the cities, the bigger buildings in general, if you watch like the 90s era Hensai Godzilla movie era, you'll see like the pyro or the explosion inside the miniatures go off, it'll light up. And in this game, before the buildings go off, you'll see that light go off, and it's almost like an indicator that you hit it in the game. But as a movie fan, you're like, oh, that's cool. It's like the little model just got detonated and exploded. There's so many little touches like that as far as the animations are concerned. Even the buildings, like they don't destroy like a building where it's going to fall over on its side. They'll go straight down like the miniatures imploding on themselves. Like, there's so many little labors of love touches here in the graphics that are awesome. But I can't sit here and say glowingly that the graphics are amazing. I think the animations are amazing, but I don't think the graphics are.
Yeah, I remember playing as Mothra because that was obviously my goal here playing this game, and I had to fight Batra, and I remember in that level seeing the Ferris wheel and just being like, man, this is so cool to look at. It's one of these games, if you walk by, if you're like making iced tea and lemonade or something, and someone else is playing it, and you're like, wow, that looks really cool. Walking by, it looks great. But if you had to sit there and watch it for longer than a couple of seconds, it's like, oh.
I thought the ocean water looked pretty decent, and there was like a forest sort of level. I think that looked all right. It's just the cities were just cut and paste. This game would have benefited from a texture upgrade.
Yeah, it's not like the levels were sprawling, so there wasn't like a whole lot going on to them. So it's kind of surprising that some of them are kind of bland. It looks like the trees looked okay, but some of the buildings looked a little rough.
And I don't know if this isn't a reference, or I don't know if it was a reference to the movies or not, but I feel like if you have a map of an existing city, you can generically put buildings where real buildings are in that time period. So if you're going to be doing, I don't know, a section of Tokyo specifically, you have a map where it shows you, what buildings are built there instead of just cut and pasting random ones. So that's kind of what it felt like, is it was a cut and paste generic city instead of being like somewhere in Japan.
I think that's a super fair point, because my observations were like generic city, and then there's a famous landmark from a movie like the Ferris wheel or one of the main towers, but it's literally just in its generic, bland, boring city. It's interesting that, yeah, they'll sit there and detail these iconic locations as far as a building goes, but the rest of it is pretty bull.
Could have very well been no time constraints too. I mean, that's got to be a common theme you got to keep in mind with this game.
I mean, maybe, but we're still like, they're still building roads and they're still building. If I'm living in a city in a game that exists, I'm like, oh, where's my house? Or I feel like that might have happened in Spider-Man. Did they kind of replicate the city pretty well?
Yeah, I think they scanned it, yeah.
Right. So this is this kind of, I mean, that was a little bit later of a release, but it's kind of the same thing where you can scan it and you can make the road go exactly where the road's supposed to be on a map. And here's this intersection and here's that intersection. And if you know the city, you know the layout. And so that house on the corner could have been somebody's house that they knew. It didn't have to look like their house, but it could have been placed in the specific position that someone's house was. Or that convenience store, everybody knows that convenience store, but it doesn't have to look like it. It could generically have been that city. So someone living there would have been like, oh, Godzilla, I'm just going to go step on my house right now. Like, that'd be awesome. But yeah. I don't feel like that's what happened, and I could be wrong. I mean, someone can freely correct me on the internet, but it did not look like or feel like they took mapping into consideration for a city that Godzilla was supposed to be in.
Yeah, I agree. And again, the PS4 version was kind of the director's cut, right? That had time to do something like that and put on the extra polish and make this awesome. And they didn't for whatever reason. Also, I want to say some of the tanks, the cars, the boats, they all look pretty bad too. The military fighting Godzilla, that's part of the iconic thing from the movies. I will say, like, the phaser tanks, the older technologies in the game look better. And that might add to, like, the toy scanning, maybe. I don't know if they did that for the vehicles and whatnot. But, like, the Tesla tanks, they look awesome. The more modern battleship cruisers and helicopters and airplanes, not so much. I'll say the fire looks nice. Like when the missiles hit Godzilla's body and explode, it looks pretty cool. It looks faithful to the movie, where especially the earlier ones where they just piled the cheese on and there's like explosion, explosion, explosion. It's very faithful as far as the look of the game. As far as the execution of how great it looks to the normal eye, up for debate.
I was able to look past a lot of the other problems by just kind of grinning ear to ear over how awesome the little things like the phaser tanks and the animations look to kind of help me see past some of the extreme limitations.
Right. It's like I don't want to sit here and shit on it too much. I don't want to sit here and defend it on it too much. I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. I don't think it's polished, but the look looks correct, not necessarily good. Am I conveying that the best way? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I think it had a huge loss with effects that stayed in the environment. So I mean, when you're watching a Godzilla movie and he shoots a super huge, giant radiation beam across the city, there's a giant, huge trench of fire and whatever destruction. Like, you shoot a beam in this Godzilla game through the city, it doesn't stay there. It just kind of blows some building up, and then next thing you know, you've got the flat ground. Like, there's no debris, there's no fire, there's no smoke. So it was a huge loss to not be able to, like, let me shoot my beam over here, and it just has this gigantic, like, ditch of fire and flame just shooting out that you kind of stayed on the map like footprints in snow. I know that's kind of a new thing, I guess, but like even then there was no indicator that you had done any destruction except for the flat square on the ground.
Yeah, they could have done a 300-foot stomp on some of the bigger buildings. That would have been cool.
As cheesy as the effects are in like SOS and Final Wars, they look better as far as that than this game did, which I realize is movie budget versus game budget, but it's something definitely that should have been possible. It's a good observation.
I mean, I don't know. Was there little bits of smoke shooting up anywhere or whatnot?
It's pretty flat.
It was a second since we all played this one, so I'm having trouble recalling some things, but I don't recall, like, when we went for the 100%, we just wiped the clean slate. I don't remember any fire or any, like, the ground being broken anywhere. It was just like the rollout mats for the little toy cars you got. Like, there's your ground, like the little green ones, you roll it out and you play with your little cars on it. Like, that was the Godzilla ground after all the buildings were gone.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the big iconic buildings, they kind of had some crumble, a little bit of smoke. The generators have fire and smoke, but that's about it. There's not a lot of depth to your destruction. And even making a good point about the beams, Barry, there's times you shoot a beam and you're like, I'm going to level half of this map, and it's, nope, this building takes 3 hits and you only hit it once with your beam.
Yeah, that was really disappointing too. Like, it didn't feel like I was the power of Godzilla. I mean, the building took a whole bunch of tail swipes to swipe this little gas station off the map. I don't know. And like Nate had let me borrow the Shin Godzilla recently, so I'd watched it, and like that image of like after he swipes the city with that huge giant beam and it stays there. Why isn't it staying there in the game? Come on. We're only in this map for like 4 or 5 minutes tops anyways. Like, you can get the graphics to stay there for a smidge longer.
It's off topic, but it's awesome. And my favorite shot in Shin Godzilla is when the camera's super, super far panned back and you realize how big the city is and how much Godzilla's destroyed. And you're just like, oh my God, this Godzilla is such a badass. Like, it's so awesome. You can cut that, but it's so cool. I'm getting goosebumps. Look.
So there's filters in this game for like basically just your camera lens. It would have been cool if there was almost filters for like the building models and the vehicle models and stuff too, to make them a little clunkier. Because you watch 60s Godzilla, very much so can tell they're miniatures, and it's almost adding to the charm of that. I just think that would have been something cool they could have done, like kind of based on what creature you are, staged your area based on that era. I think it would have added to the experience of what they were actually going for a little more.
Yeah, again, I think it's a missed opportunity, because if you remember that tutorial, it's 54 Godzilla, and it's black and white, and the scene, like hillside scenery, like when they first appears,
The power lines.
Right. There's things that like they made the effort and they didn't fully commit to that effort in this game. It's a missed opportunity of the game if I've ever seen it.
I almost wish it was less of like a free-for-all and more of like, all right, you're going to reenact this scene from the movie.
Yes.
Instead of just dropping you and be like, hit these generators. I feel like it would have been more of like a quote-unquote historical appreciation. Like, if they really wanted us to feel like we were in the movies and like give us the scenes from the movies.
That would have been perfect for the anniversary game. Straight up. So the sound for this game, honestly, one of my favorite aspects of this game. To me, I think they just nailed it, man. So every monster, even like the different Godzillas, right? They all have their own roar, slightly different. They're all in there. All of the monsters have like literally the clips uploaded from the movie of their sounds. They all sound like they're supposed to. The music, you've got original music in the game. It's all right. It's not the best, but when you hit certain levels of destruction and they start sending more tanks or different monsters at you, all the monster themes are in the game. All of the classic Godzilla music is in the game, which there's no other word for it, Barry. You ready? It's timeless, man. Like the original Godzilla movie, the very first one, they used the same Godzilla songs for the ones they're doing now. They were in Shin Godzilla. Yeah, they might be slightly updated or anything, but it's the same beloved Godzilla music, and it's in the game. That was awesome. I remember Nate playing it. It's the first time Nate got to play this game. And the Godzilla March came on, the tanks rolled up, Nate just turned around and looked at me and was like, bro. I was like, I know, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, I can't really express how great of a job they did with the sound in this game. Like, I put my controller down and just like listening to the music for a minute because I was like, this is so awesome as a Godzilla fan. It's really hard to screw up Godzilla noise. It's all very iconic. You hear it and you know what it is. Even the screeching effect with the flying monsters was in there in some of them. They did a great job with the music. The score felt like, even the original songs felt Godzilla-esque. They weren't as iconic as the original ones, but they felt like they belonged. It wasn't like a random, like, why is a techno song in here? It felt very much Godzilla to its essence, and that definitely, to me, the best aspect of this game was the sound.
Yeah, for me, the sound was a 10 out of 10. Also, side note, Jet Jaguar theme is in the game, so extra points for that.
Is it Jet Jaguar or Jet Jagular? Because you keep saying Jagular, and I'm confused.
It's Jaguar, but there's an inside joke.
What is the inside joke? Because
the way they say it in the movie, because the dubbing's horrible and they don't know what the fuck they're reading.
So is it Jagular?
Jaga.
Jaga?
It's Jaguar technically, but
so English, you're driving a Jaguar, you're driving a Jaguar. So
Jaguar.
Well, it's like in England though, it's a Jaguar. They don't say Jaguar, they say Jaguar.
In the movie, they can't read.
I can't tell if this is you guys being bubble mouths or not, which is why I'm asking.
No, yeah. People will know.
What?
Yeah, people will know.
Okay, all right. If people will know, I would just be like, what's going on? Because I don't know. Yeah. I got no idea. So I'm like, what's going on?
You're good.
You said that again. I was like, wait, what does he have typed out? Is that how
But even some of like the chopping noises and like the hits the monsters made, like they were so on point, like the crunchiness of it and like some of like the like it sounded just like lifted from the movies, and it was really. It's one of those games, if you didn't have to play it and you close your eyes and just listening to it, you're like, oh, I'm watching a Godzilla movie.
Anything?
No. Sounds were cool. Music was good. Godzilla goes raw. 10 out of 10.
I guess as someone that doesn't have the same attachment to the sound and visuals, did you think it fit? Did it feel weird that it was like kind of was older stuff being put on a newer screen?
I didn't think the music came off as older.
Distracting or anything?
It just came off as Godzilla. I would honestly be disappointed if they put in some random new age modern rock song or techno, like you said. Like it wouldn't have fit. I would have been a little disappointing.
Puff Daddy, or excuse me, Diddy at the time.
I mean,
you didn't get the Diddy track, dang it.
The Simon Says song, slap that one in there.
Bangs.
No, the music was good. It would have for them to make this game and call it a historical celebration of Godzilla and then like gut the music and put something totally wrong. Like y'all would have been up in flames. So they obviously made the right choice and they knew what they were doing with that music.
Nothing but high praises for the sound design for this game. Music, the actual sounds themselves, even the beams. Like Ghidorah has his own beam. Godzilla has his own beam sound. Like they're all in there. There's no stone unturned as far as the sound's concerned when it comes to these kaiju.
I'm sure Toho has a huge, very immersive database on all of their monsters and exactly how the sounds are and exactly how to replicate them.
Toho's so controlling of the licenses. It's not just like Godzilla and Friends trademark. Every single kaiju has their own trademark with an image and a name and the stamp of TM. So like, yeah, if you see like, Spider-Man 1998, Godzilla will have Godzilla, a certain circular trademark logo with the name, with the Godzilla type it is. It's insane.
It's an emblem. Yeah, it's super interesting. Because I remember the first time seeing it as a kid, I'm like, what the hell is all this? And it's like the whole breakdown of how Toho operates. How Toho operates. It's very interesting.
Let's talk price and collectability. So a complete in-box copy of this game for PS4 is about $210 to $225. The disc only is about $175 to $180 US dollar. And a new sealed copy, the most recent sale on eBay was $400. But it's hovering around $350 to $400.
Is this for PS4?
PS4, yeah. And then for the interesting note, the PAL version, it's about $160 complete. You do get the same box art as us. Obviously, the rating is different. You get the big, orange, ugly Peggy.
Also the PS4 version?
Yes.
Okay.
These are all PS4 version, excuse me. The Japanese version is technically a different name of the game, and the box art's completely different as well. It's actually called Godzilla Versus because of the added multiplayer mode, and it runs about the same as the US now. It used to be much more affordable, but I think due to the digital delisting of this game is why the physical copies have risen so high, because I don't think this game was reviewed particularly great, but that itch is there to like Godzilla fans want a Godzilla game. And as said in the earlier part of this episode, this is the only Godzilla game of this generation of consoles. Like this is the only way to play it now too, is if you find a disc. And I think it's interesting how close the actual disc only sales for this game are compared to the case. Like I want the case for this game. The box art's beautiful. It's awesome. It looks like a classic black and white Godzilla poster. And the Japanese Versus one's kind of got a bunch of monsters on it with like fire, and it just says Versus across it. It's not as faithful to Godzilla.
Metacritic gave this game a 38.
I'm not
User
surprised.
score is a 3.3.
I'm not surprised.
Which generally user scores are better than Metacritic, so that's saying something.
Yeah.
I mean, touching on the box art is awesome.
Yeah.
And then you play the game. I'm like, whoa, dang.
Yeah. The box art is absolutely beautiful. And then the PS3 Japanese box art's actually really cool too. It looks better than the PS4 version box art in Japan, in my opinion.
So with that information leading into the ultimate question and the title of this series, is it worth it? I'll go first. So my thoughts on this game is that this is an amazing Godzilla simulator. However, most people don't buy games to sit there and be like, oh, this is cool to look at. This is cool to hear. This is cool to see. Like, we buy games because we want to play them. As a major Godzilla fan, I do enjoy this in small bursts. I've put about 20 hours into this on my PS4 Pro, but that's the thing. Like, it's not so fun where I've, transferred my data to my PS5. It's an interesting thing, man. Like, I love, and just absolutely adore Godzilla. As far as collecting goes, it was one of the first things I collected. I've got so many fond memories of my dad and my brother here just going to conventions back in the day, pre-internet days, and just scooping up all the movies we could off of, ripped VHSs and the imported Bandai figures, just grabbing them. Like, it was literally the first thing I collected, I think, that and comic books. And it's something that I've always, like, every Godzilla, everything I grab when I see it. So it's an interesting thing for me. Like, I love Godzilla. If I didn't own this, I would have to buy it because it is Godzilla. But as far as determining is it worth it, I think this game has a lot of things going for it, honestly. It's unique. There's nothing like, quote, playing it. And that, again, you don't play this because the game's great. As a Godzilla fan, this game is rad. It is the most faithful, hands down, Godzilla game ever made. I do think from a monetary standpoint, and again, I'm not your financial advisor, so don't listen to me. I think there's room for this to grow. I have seen the price kind of fluctuate up and down over the years, but I think with the delisting and then that itch that people want to play a Godzilla game in modern times, this is your only option. I mean, the limited Warzone mode's gone now. There's no way to see Godzilla with a controller in your hand except for this, and the only way you can play it's if you have a physical copy now. So I do think there's room for this, but I think it's probably a safe buy. I would say it's worth it overall. Again, I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. Major Godzilla fan here, ultra collector here. I think it's a good buy. What are your thoughts, Nate?
This one's tough for me. So, like I always say every episode, depends on what kind of collector you are. So, I don't own this game. Brian was fortunate enough he pre-ordered this game and paid, $60 retail for it?
Yep.
I would do that all day, no problem. Like, I could justify $60 for it.
Literally the only person in the city is what the GameStop manager told me.
Now, this is a game I do want to own because it's Godzilla. I have discovered, like, I really enjoy collecting for PS4. It's a very steep price for what you get. Now, if I were to be honest with myself and take my Godzilla rose-colored glasses off, it'd be really hard for me to be like, go out and buy this game because it's not fun. Like, you play games for fun at the end, entertainment at the end of the day. It's a steep price point for what it is. It is, by the numbers, pretty limited quantity game, so it's got that going for it. Godzilla fans are beyond hardcore. They're extreme. So it's one of those games that's not going to pop up available for sale very much. Most people who bought it are like collectors like me and Brian, who are very big Godzilla fans. I'm going to say it like this. There are other games I'd rather have right now, but this one's been on my radar for a while because of what it is. I'm going to say if you're a Godzilla fan, it's worth it because we don't know if we're ever getting a Godzilla game again, to be blunt. Toho, it's very quiet about what they're doing with the future of the franchise. It feels like it's one of those things they can't ignore forever, but the gap between getting Shin Godzilla and now it's been pretty significant at this point. I know the Shin universe is something in the works, but we don't know a whole lot of information about that here in America yet. We don't know if Godzilla is even officially going to get attached to that. We don't know if it's just merchandise. We don't know if it's going to be a series. I would ponder if a new Godzilla came out, took off like wildfire, would that affect the value of this game going down? Just like if you have something, maybe the reason this game is so expensive is because it is the only thing that can meet that demand, like you hinted at, Brian. But I've seen this one move in price so much. I saw this game at one point get close to $400, and it kind of died down to where it is now around the $200, $225, $250 range. But this is for me. If you're buying an investment, I would say wait, personally, because we don't know what the future of Godzilla brings. If you're just like, I collect video games and expensive, it's hard for me to tell you go spend $200 on this, to be honest. Even as a huge Godzilla fan, I haven't done it yet, and I want this game really bad, and I haven't pulled the trigger for a reason. After playing it, I had this weird itch where I keep thinking about this game every once in a while. I can't explain that to you guys. I think it's because I wanted to see more, but I don't want to sit there and play it. It's not fun. I guess overall, I'm going to say no for now. Now, if it's been 10 years, there's still no new Godzilla, price point hasn't moved that much, maybe. But overall, I'm going to say no. Barry, what are your thoughts on the complete opposite spectrum?
There's a lot of things you said that I actually disagree with, and I'm probably going to be a little challenging, but like if I was a Godzilla fan, I would feel disrespected by this game. Like, I'm a big Power Ranger fan, and so if I got a Power Ranger game and all I got to do was walk around as a Zord and fight somebody and that was the whole game, like I would be like, okay, this sucks. I mean, disrespect is probably a wrong word, but like super disappointed.
I think historically we're numb to it.
If everything that's happening in Godzilla and all the history of Godzilla and everything they could have done, and it's this big 60th anniversary event, and that's what I got, like that just feels like a kick in the nuts. So I would be like, I can understand why this game didn't sell very well, because if Godzilla fans are really that rabid, it would have sold better, but it didn't, because I think everybody knew how bad it was. So, I mean, like, no, this game is absolutely not worth it, and everybody knows it. That's why the price is so high, because people are selling it for that much, don't actually want to play the game because they like Godzilla. So, I don't know. In my opinion, do not buy this game for $200. Wait until it goes down to MSRP or less, because you may get a Godzilla game in the future, and it may be better than this, and nobody's going to want it. I don't know. Maybe you don't get back on the market, but, like, maybe it's just my perspective of, like, not growing up with Godzilla, but especially with growing up with some of the other things that I got a lot. Like, if I got something handed like this, an equivalent, I would just be so disappointed and let down as like a fan. Even if we want to talk about, oh, the animation's really cool and the sound effects are really cool. Okay, like, I just looked it up. It takes 51 hours to watch every single Godzilla movie. So would you rather watch every single Godzilla movie again for 51 hours or play this game for 51 hours? No, I'm spending my time watching Godzilla. So why would I pay for this game? Sorry, bye game. Let me go buy something. I'll spend $200 and buy every single Godzilla movie. You know,
super interesting point, man.
Like,
I think it's like historically we've been numb to there being a good. There's 3 I can think of that are 2 that were good and 1 that was passable. But historically, Godzilla games haven't been good. It's kind of a thing. I think maybe we're just numb to it at this point.
I mean, maybe, but if every single game that you're given is bad, and you're a Godzilla fan, wouldn't you want better? Like, don't defend this game just because you're a Godzilla fan.
See, this is the argument I hear all the time for this game.
Don't defend it just because you're a Godzilla fan.
And here's where I'm going to play...
Fight it because you're a Godzilla fan.
Here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate for a little bit, because I felt very much like you did when I first bought this game, Barry. And after reading this interview with the director, where he's like, we gave Toho, the kings of Godzilla, the license holder, the game that they dreamed of and the game that they wanted, and they think it's great. And if you play it as a Godzilla simulator...
We just talked about how bad the diorama was.
Right. I'm just talking about the game in general. Like, it feels like Godzilla. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he was like, it's not so much you're playing it, it's that you're feeling Godzilla. And Nate touched on it with the sound a little bit earlier, where it's like Godzilla has this very pinpoint thing which you can't quite articulate correctly. And it just oozes that Godzilla factor, but it's not a fun video game. Let's just be clear about that. It's super interesting to me because... yeah, I don't want to sit here and defend it because I love Godzilla, and I don't think that's why I'm defending it, but I definitely have a different perspective on it now. After I felt very much like you did. I was like, what the hell? I spent $60 and there's no way this is a full-fledged retail game. This is bullshit. Like, I was pissed when I first bought this game.
All right, look, but if this game is supposed to make you feel like Godzilla, what else did PlayStation have out at the time of the PS4? The PlayStation VR. So, you know what? They could have put a PlayStation VR Godzilla game and put you in Godzilla, and you got to stomp around and shoot stuff around. Like, I don't know, like, this does not make me feel like a giant monster. It makes me feel like a slow slog walking through water with pants on.
I think it's like, going back on the good, well-received Godzilla games that sold well, the Melee games, those weren't so off-touch from Godzilla, or it didn't feel like I was playing Godzilla. They had great sound in them, too. The gameplay was super fun. Barry, if we threw one of those in right now, you'd have a blast with them. You'd be like, this is mindless Godzilla monster mashing fun. And that's like, I understand they weren't going for a fun angle with this game, but this game's almost dreadful to play at times. Like,
to me, the best way I can summarize it, like, this game was not made for the North American Godzilla audience. This game's Japanese AF, down in the controls, even like the menus and everything. It's super weird to try to put like an Eastern lens on it. But I think that's the best way you can say it was made for the Eastern Godzilla audience.
I mean, I don't think Godzilla's ever came over the West properly. I don't think, and that's the difference between, and that's the difference between like Godzilla being such an icon in Japan, because like you need to live as a Japanese person in that history to understand why Godzilla is so important. And like us as Westerners are never going to understand that. So what we expect for Godzilla games, we're never going to get it. So in that aspect, like Japan probably did receive it much better than we did. I don't, maybe there's a site where you can show like scores from Japan versus
I know
like
like
the West.
Kotaku scored the PS3 version 7s, 8s, 8.5s.
I mean, it's the same reason as like Shin Godzilla was a way bigger deal in Japan than it was
one
here.
movie
Like,
picture of the year over there. Yeah.
they just see it in a whole different light than we do, and I don't think we're ever going to understand it, and I don't think Westerners are ever going to understand it, and I don't think I don't know. Maybe if this game speaks to you in a certain way, you can buy it, but like this game was disappointing. Highly disappointing.
Yeah, I guess
that's a great way to say it. There's times where I'm like, man, I wish this, I wish that, I wish this. It is disappointing.
I definitely there's a reason why I still haven't pulled the trigger on it, and even though I do want this game, it's because it's, for what it is, I don't feel like if this was closer to $100, I could definitely swallow that pill easier. Constantly playing this, it was, man, I wish this, and this. I've never looked at a game like as much for this podcast so far. I'm like, man, I wish this was different. I wish this was different. I mean, even just the basic structure of the, in quotation, story mode, like, I wish this was different. I think this game could have been great with some polish. I think this game could have been, like, with the expectation of your anniversary, it should have been, to be blunt, kind of touching on what Barry said. I definitely feel like this game is 100% missed the mark, missed potential. I know it went through development hell, so like, shout out to them for even getting it made. But the price point, for me personally, as a Godzilla fan, doesn't justify.
Right. It might be because I did pay retail for it and I already have it. It might be easy for me to speak on it, but I'm such a Mega Godzilla fan. I'm such a weird collector. Like, this is something I needed and want if I didn't have it already. Just my personal opinion. You make your own. I'm not your financial advisor. But,
I mean, would you tell somebody who didn't like Godzilla to go buy this? For $200.
Your video game collecting
just
sense?
For pure, like, I want to play it? Absolutely
because this
not.
game has proven that it does not have reachable value past a certain point. It's already dropped again.
Right. It fluctuates a lot.
Especially considering the fact that it may come back on the store and there may be another Godzilla come out in the future that's better. I don't think this game's going to get any higher than it is. I think saying a lot of expensive games always has the potential to go up, sure, but like, I don't know, we were at the cusp last year and the year before of a lot of things, and we're simmering down. We're not at the peak boiling point anymore of a lot of stuff.
This definitely seems like a product of that for sure, where it's starting to go down, settle to a lower price point for sure. Especially
now that the fact that gas is $5 a gallon and nobody's getting stimmy checks. Nobody's paying those prices of these games, so they're going down. Yep. When's that going to... When in the future is anything like that going to happen again?
I'll end with this. I think, for me personally, Nate, you said something earlier where it was like, part of me wanted more. And it's not because the game's fun, right? But it's because it's got that Godzilla feeling that you can't articulate and you can't put in the words, man. It oozes that. And that's why it is worth it to me, because I am that big of a Godzilla fan. So I'll end with that.
I will still disagree. I mean...
Yeah, I think most normies out there are going to agree with you 100%.
I mean, with anything that you like, you should want them to do better. Like, I love Star Wars, and I will rip on horrible Star Wars things till the day I die, because for them to have so much money to be able to put into some of this stuff and big iconic things, like, they should give us the best they got instead of being like, here, make a game, put it out for this date, yada, yada, yada. And it's just going to make them look worse.
You brought up the point, Barry, of you could watch every movie and the amount it would take to pretty much unlock everything in this game. And that is the hardest point for me to combat. Because like Brian touched on it, the reason why I was even remotely invested in this game is because it felt Godzilla. I could go watch every movie.
We want to talk about a celebration of the history of Godzilla, and you're going to put the same amount of time in this game that it would take to watch every single one and still justify the fact that it's worth that. Absolutely not.
It's a very hard point to argue. In fact, we should probably have a movie marathon soon. That's where I'm at.
I'm down.
51 straight hours of Godzilla, and to celebrate that you'd play this shitty-ass game.
Let's have a race. I'll sit here and play Godzilla PS4 and you guys watch the movies.
We'll see who's going to come out happier at the end.
Guarantee I know the answer to that.
You know what? Godzilla gets an A+ on the soundtrack, though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I think it's sound and animation.
So it's like overall, we touched on it earlier, historically Godzilla games haven't been great, and I think a lot of that's a hardware limitation. So I remember playing one of them on Super Nintendo. It's like you're a dot and you're controlling Godzilla. Just felt so like
Super Godzilla.
Yes, felt of the times. So this one coming out PS3, PS4 era, I feel like it should have a little more meat to the bones. It feels like it should be able to deliver. There shouldn't be a technological standpoint of holding you back from being able to have a killer Godzilla game. And this one feels almost worse than some of the old ones. It feels clunkier. It feels not like a game. It's a really tough sell, man.
All in all, it sounds like we got 2 no's and a yes, right?
That's a collective no. So, Barry, what's happening for the next episode?
For the next episode, we're going to go into unique video game collectibles that each of us have picked out, want to talk about, maybe some things that you guys have never heard of before, maybe you're kind of hard to find. Not games per se, but game-related, whether it be special strategy guides, promotional materials, maybe collectors' items of some sort, all kinds of those things. So, unique video game collectibles on Collecti-Bros.
So, guys, what do you think? Do you think Godzilla would be worth it? Do you think it's a giant steaming pile of shit like the 98 movie? Let us know on our socials. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Collecti-Bros Pod. We do appreciate you guys listening, and please interact with us and let us know about this and the other games we have posted. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks, guys.
Barry gonna kill you for that 98 comment.
Yeah, for the record, I think the 98 Godzilla is pretty cool. Looks like a big old T-Rex. Alright, look, I hate Godzilla's legs. This movie solved that problem. Alright, I know it's a thing to get hung up on, but his big, fat, beefy,
like the tree trunk
fucking,
boys? Yeah.
big ol'
He's super bipedal,
giant
though. The original one's
thunder
super
thigh
bipedal.
Godzilla legs, I just can't get past.
It's to support
it.
its giant frame.
Well, T-Rexes have giant frames too, and they have normal looking legs.
Godzilla's
that's
like 26 times the size of a T-Rex.
Here's the thing.
Well, make 25 times the size of a T-Rex leg and put it
So,
on there.
OG
98
got-
did it. Look, all I'm saying is 98 Godzilla's got normal looking legs, and that's why I like it.
I think
the design's
his
cool.
legs are gorgeous. I
think
can't argue
that-
with. You know what?
Some good looking legs.
It's a great
Teaser.
transition.
I was about to say, we know where Barry's going. So talking about smashing, Nate, marry, kill, fuck Godzilla characters, go.
All right, we're keeping this strictly kaiju. So, Mary has to be Mothra. She's been number 1. It's not even an argument. To fuck, I'm gonna go King Caesar. Seems like he'd be a generous lover. It's furry in the right places. Gotta love it. Killing Kamanga. I do not like spiders, and this is a giant city-sized spider, so I'm good. He's got to go. Barry, what you got?
So I'm gonna marry the Mechagodzilla 3, the Kiryu,
It's beautiful.
because he has so many utilities.
Oh yeah,
It does.
He could do a lot of things.
he's the Wii.
I gotta, I gotta live with this Godzilla forever. I want some versatility, something new every day. I don't know. He's got a lot of options other than just shooting some fire. He can do some other things. We gonna fuck King Ghidorah. 3 heads, no arms. What could we do? I don't know. Does he have 2 tails?
Yeah,
It's forked.
Okay, a forked tail, 3 heads, and no arms. So, and he got wings. So there's a wild ride there for you.
there's a Mecha King Ghidorah.
My list is strictly from the game because I don't know
Understand.
Godzilla very
It's
well,
fine.
so I'm only picking from this list.
Understandable.
And I'm gonna kill Mothra because I hate bugs,
Ooh,
and that is the reason why. I don't like, and y'all know me, I don't like bugs that fly. If it flies at me, it needs to die. Mothra larva is fine, it's a little wiggly bug, but the flying ones gotta go. Gotta go. I hate bugs. Can't do it.
just turn a lamp on.
Bye bye. I know, Nate, I'm killing your wife, but
Spoiler.
I can't do them flying
You
fuckers.
could have said Batra.
Nope. There was no picture for Batra on this list, so I immediately went with Mothra. Batra is a bat. It's not a bug.
Ready to
From
start
my
fights?
extensive Godzilla knowledge.
Speechless.
Classic Mothra's kind of whack, bro.
Shut your mouth.
Until after the Rebirth movie, she was kind of whack.
definitely wash your mouth out.
All right, we got Mothra, Batra, a bat. So I'm gonna pick the bug one. Mothra's dead.
Makes sense.
All right.
If they're both flying in a house and you see Batra, you picking Batra. But I get what you're saying.
If I see a bat flying around my house, I'm gonna be like, get out of my house, little bat.
I
Go
went
live.
from
If
being
I see a
upset-
moth, you're gonna get squished.
I went from being upset at you for saying Mothra to Brian saying Mothra wasn't good till Thursday. So
Not the movies, but the actual monster wasn't like a badass.
The heat is off me. Your turn, Brian.
Yeah, so here, Nate, this might cheer you up. I am marrying the legendary Mothra. She proved that she is ride or die. She sacrificed herself for Godzilla. That's the type of woman you want to wife up, right? Killing Kumonga, Spider, don't play that. You gone. Bye. And then fucking Godzilla 2000. King of the Monsters, I think, represents the most kingly form of Godzilla. You know, just the admiration of every man, woman.
Hot take. Nobody wants to fuck Shin Godzilla and have them thunder thighs crush your head.
The tail, dude. The tail with all the little
the
people,
human dead
Godzilla's-
bodies in it. Yeah, I don't know.
It's
I don't
all
know. That's
fingies.
not, now that you say it, I don't know. Dead
The
bodies.
lasers.
Thunder thighs.
The lasers. Oh, what about the first form Shin Godzilla?
Every single form was a no.